Okay, we're doing A Course in Miracles and we're on to chapter 25, The Justice of God, and we're reading section 3, which is Perception and Choice. It's a very interesting section. We'll have a lot of things to say about it. Okay, and so here we go. To the extent to which you value guilt, to that extent will you perceive a world in which attack is justified. To the extent to which you recognize that guilt is meaningless, to that extent you will perceive attack cannot be justified. This is in accord with perception's fundamental law. You see what you believe is there, and you believe it there because you want it there. Perception has no other law than this. The rest but stems from this to hold it up and offer it support. This is perception's form adapted to this world of God's more basic law that love creates itself and nothing but itself. God's laws do not obtain directly to a world perception rules, for such a world could not have been created by the mind to which perception has no meaning. Yet are his laws reflected everywhere. Not that the world where this reflection is real at all, only because his son believes it is, and from his son's belief, he could not let himself be separate entirely. He could not enter his son's insanity with him, but he could be sure his sanity went there with him, so he could not be lost forever in the madness of his wish. Perception rests on choosing, knowledge does not. Knowledge has but one law because it has but one creator. But this world has two who made it, and they do not see it as the same. To each it has a different purpose, and to each it is a perfect means to serve the goal for which it is perceived. For specialness, it is the perfect frame to set it off, the perfect battleground to wage its wars, the perfect shelter for illusions which it would make real. Not one, but it upholds in its perception, not one, but can be fully justified. There is another maker of the world, the simultaneous corrector of the mad belief that anything could be established and maintained without some link that kept it still within the laws of God. Not as the law itself upholds the universe as God created it, but in some form adapted to the need the Son of God believes he has. Corrected error is the error's end, and thus has God protected still his Son, even in error. There is another purpose in the world that error made, because it has another maker who can reconcile its goal with his Creator's purpose. In his perception of the world, nothing is seen but justifies forgiveness and the sight of perfect sinlessness. Nothing arises but is met with instant and complete forgiveness. Nothing remains an instant to obscure the sinlessness that shines unchanged, beyond the pitiful attempts of specialness to put it out of mind where it must be, and light the body up instead of it. The lamps of heaven are not for mind to choose to see them where it will. If it elects to see them everywhere from their home, as if they lit a place where they could never be, then must the maker of the world correct your error, lest you remain in darkness where the lamps are not. Everyone here has entered darkness, yet no one has entered it alone. Nor need he stay more than an instant, for he has come with heaven's help within him, ready to lead him out of darkness into light at any time. The time he chooses can be any time, for help is there awaiting but his choice. And when he chooses to avail himself of what is given him, then will he see each situation that he thought before was means to justify his anger turned to an event which justifies his love. He will hear plainly that the calls to war he heard before are really calls to peace. He will perceive that where he gave attack is but another altar where he can, with equal ease and far more happiness, bestow forgiveness. And he will reinterpret all temptation as just another chance to bring him joy. How can a misperception be a sin? Let all your brother's errors be to you nothing except a chance for you to see the workings of the helper given you to see the world he made instead of yours. What then is justified? What do you want? For these two questions are the same. And when you see them as the same, your choice is made. For it is seeing them as one that brings release from the belief that there are two ways to see. This world has much to offer to your peace and many chances to extend your own forgiveness. Such its purpose is, to those who want to see peace and forgiveness descend on them and offer them the light. The maker of the world of gentleness has perfect power to offset the world of violence and hate that seems to stand between you and his gentleness. It is not there in his forgiving eyes, and therefore it need not be there in yours. Sin is the fixed belief perception cannot change. What has been damned is damned and damned forever, being forever unforgivable. If then it is forgiven, sin's perception must have been wrong, and thus is change made possible. The Holy Spirit, too, sees what he sees as far beyond the chance of change. But on his vision, sin cannot encroach, for sin has been corrected by his sight. And thus it must have been an error, not a sin. For what it claimed could never be, has been. Sin is attacked by punishment, and so preserved. But to forgive it is to change its state from error into truth. The Son of God could never sin, but he can wish for what would hurt him, and he has the power to think he can be hurt. What could this be except a misperception of himself? Is this a sin or a mistake, forgivable or not? Does he need help or condemnation? Is it your purpose that he be saved or damned? Forgetting not that what he is to you will make this choice your future. For you make it now, the instant when all time becomes a means to reach a goal. Make then your choice. But recognize that in this choice, the purpose of the world you see is chosen and will be justified. So much being said here, and really only one thing. I think one of the basic ideas that the Course, that Jesus really drills in over and over again, is this idea. Obviously, the atonement principle, one way to state the atonement principle is the Son of God is guiltless. The Son of God is sinless. Right? Another way to put it is there's no separation between, there is no separation. Separation is an illusion. But another way to put it is like I just did, which is that sin is unreal. There is no sin. There's only a belief. There's only the wish of the Son. This is the way Jesus puts it. There's the wish of the Son to be separate and to play the game of sin. That is not God's wish. But because the Son has wished it, God could not let the Son be without a solution or a way out of that. And so God sent the Holy Spirit. This is the basic metaphysics of Course in Miracles. Sent the Holy Spirit when that original error was made, and it was just an error. It was not a sin. It was just an error. It was a tiny mad idea. So God could not let the Son go into the illusion without a way out, right? Because God is completely loving, and this is all metaphorical. I mean, this is a way to put all of this in words, because God doesn't really do anything, right? God just is, right? And the whole idea of the atonement is that it never happened to begin with. But since the Son thinks it happened, since we think it happened, we have to understand that there is a way out, right? And that is one way to get out is to recognize that anything that we perceive to be sinful or wrong or evil or whatever it is, it's not that. That's the ego's perception. That's the ego's interpretation. But if we choose the Holy Spirit's interpretation, all of that is really not sinful and not so egregious or impossible to change, but rather it's merely an error or a misperception. It's due to error and misperception. And error and misperception can be corrected, right? So when we realize that, we realize not only can it be corrected in outside of ourselves, like someone that we see as sinful or we see as evil or bad or wrong, or that can all be corrected. That is, that does not deserve condemnation. That deserves our compassion, understanding, and helpfulness. And that goes for ourselves as well. And when we see our brother in that light, right, then we actually see ourselves that way, and we remember the truth of it all, which is that we are all caught up in this together, and the way out is, and there really is only one of us. There's only one of us here, but the way out is through that remembrance. And so, again, just to put it very simply, sin is the ego's interpretation of everything, that things are very serious and very unchangeable. And the Holy Spirit also sees something as unchangeable. So the Holy Spirit interprets those things as, no, it's not sinful, it's just error. It's just things that can be corrected. But the Holy Spirit also has something that cannot change, and that is the love of God. Can never be changed, right? So in a sense, the ego, Jesus says here that the ego is doing a perfect job in its own way, because ultimately everything is of God, even the ego, which is not a reality. It's just an illusion, but it still has the force of God, if you will. So it has that power, right? It has that. It's very powerful. And that's why we're all caught up in it, because we, again, don't take any of this too literally, but we all dream this dream together, and we made this whole thing up with the power of the thought of God to do it. And God in a way blessed it, right? Said, okay, if that's what you want, then all right. But I'm also going to send a way for you to get out of it, because you are going to want to get out of it, because it's silly, it's madness, and you're going to see that it's madness. But you maybe you'll have to play the game a little bit before you see that, and before you decide that you want to wake up and stop playing that game. This is all so hard to put into words. It's amazing that Jesus is putting it into words, but he's not necessarily putting everything into words. He's not. There's certain things that he's not really saying, but he's only pointing to, like the reality of God. He can't put that into words. He can't say what that is. He can only say, this is what you need to do to fulfill the conditions to return to that oneness again, to return to that reality. Here's what you need to do. Let's read the first part of this again. This says a lot right here, this first paragraph. To the extent to which you value guilt, to that extent will you perceive a world in which attack is justified. Okay, so if you see any value in guilt, you're going to see that there are some who are guilty or need to feel guilty, right? And let's just say, that's what all anger is a way, this is what Jesus says, all anger is a way to make your brother feel guilty. and to, keep your brother in a state of feeling guilt and sinful and ashamed. And that's all that it is. And that's, when you do that to your brother, you do that to yourself. You have made yourself guilty. And you don't, most of us don't realize that, and we don't understand why we don't feel good. But if we understood this, we would realize, why we don't feel good. To the extent to which you recognize the guilt is meaningless, to that extent you will perceive attack cannot be justified. So when you realize, or to the extent that you realize, because this is, this is all kind of on a continuum, right? This is not like, most people do not just let go of guilt like that. But you will start to warm up to the idea that no one is guilty, right? No one is sinful. That's part of the illusion, and you don't want to give energy to the illusion, unless you want to. I mean, maybe you do. This is in accord with perception's fundamental law. So this is an important line here. Perception's fundamental law. You see what you believe is there, and you believe it there because you want it there. So if you want your brother to be different than you, if you want your brother to be separate than you, then you will see your brother, you will have justification to judge your brother and find your brother guilty. Remember that your brother is any other, not just a brother, but a sister or anything or anyone or any situation. This applies to everything, right? Brother is just the term, it's just the kind of the umbrella term for everything. But you want, if you want to see separation and differences, then you will make your brother guilty, right? And you'll see, and you'll put the blame outside of yourself. In doing that, though, you will reinforce your own guilt in that process, right? So you see what you believe is there, and you believe it there because you want it there. So you only see what you want to see. In other words, we see what we want to see, and nothing more, nothing less. Perception has no other law than this. The respite stems from this to hold it up and offer its support. This is perception's form adapted to this world of God's more basic law that love creates itself and nothing but itself. Okay, so God's law, perception's law is this. God's law is love creates itself and nothing but itself. Right? Love extends, ego projects. Projection makes perception. Whatever you project is what you perceive. This is something else that Jesus has said and says at least a few times, I think, in the Course. Projection makes perception. Extension and projection. Projection is the ego's form of extension, right? Extension is what God does, and what God does is God extends love, and that only love. Nothing else is real. And because our fundamental reality is God, that's really all we can really do. So we only have one choice, really. The other choice is an illusionary choice. Following the ego is to follow an illusion, and when we do, we just reinforce the illusion, and we don't want to do that. And the steps that you take with the Course are really getting closer and closer to not giving any credence whatsoever to the illusion. Not even a second, not even a moment giving any credence to the ego's tactics. And that's a mighty work. That's a big work, a great work, the great work of your life. I'm going to leave it at that. For now. That's about 20 minutes we just did, and we're going to read the next section. It's just a little bit shorter, The Light You Bring, coming soon. Thanks so much, and feel free to leave a comment. Love to hear from you, and Om.